As we move into the museum, we come into a very interesting section where it tells you about the Wadia family, which master builders. They built ships for the American and Royal Navy. Then we have ships like HMS Cornwall, the Bombay Dock in Bombay, the Indian Navy, the First World War, Middle East operations, where Admiral Karmakar, Krishnan, Soman, they took part and got decorated. Then, of course, we go back to Kerala, where Vasco da Gama landed. So in one particular area, the history of Vasco da Gama and the Marathan power. The Marathan Navy tried to keep the foreign navies away, and Vasco da Gama must be remembered because he is the one who found India for the foreign powers, and then in a marriage it was handed over to the Royal Navy and the British. And of course, we cannot forget the great uprising of the 1857 museum. Whoever comes here looks at this and looks back at the history of India, from shipbuilding to a mutiny to Vasco da Gama to what we are today. Right? No museum can be complete without having models of the ships, so that the visitors can understand what ships the Indian Navy and the Merchant Navy has. Here is the Coast Guard ship. As we move on, this museum has got 27 models presented by the Indian Navy, by well-wishers and some of the officers we have trained. As we move on forward to explain what the Indian Navy does, we come to this particular model, which tells you the Indian Navy operates above the sea, it operates on the sea, and it operates below the sea. This, with the 27 models of the ships, give you a glimpse of the importance and the capability of the Indian Navy. To continue with the models, I've also tried to depict that we have a ship of the latest class of the Indian Navy, the Type 15s, the Type 15 Alpha, and here the American Navy ships. We are almost reaching there. The Scorpions class submarines made from Foxtrot to today. Here is a beautiful depiction of INS Delhi, Type 15, with Uran missile, and now possibly being fitted with BrahMos missile. We move to an important depiction of INS Delhi, a Type 15 Uran-fitted frigate Raul radar, a powerful ship for the new models. And as we move on, we come to a very important item, a sextant, which uses the stars and the suns to navigate. Now, of course, there is GPS navigation, but every officer knows how to use a sextant if electronics fail. Then there is the review of the fleet. Every president of India has to review the fleet in his tenure. A depiction of the ships either at Visakhapatnam or at Mumbai. And of course, now we move to INS Vikramaditya, the big aircraft carrier that followed INS Vikrant, presented by the Director General of the NCC, where an Admiral of the Navy was keen also to see that the museum flourishes. A copy of a submarine, very tough life. And here is a depiction of a barbaric chamber when people dive underwater. Naval sailors dive underwater, they are under pressure. When they come up, if they do not do depressurization, they will possibly not survive. Therefore, this barbaric chamber makes sure they are depressurized, and it is presented by the son of Commander Idnani in memory of his father, a depiction of the barbaric chamber. The Indian Navy has, of course, many small artifacts, but more important to look down that we cooperate in humanitarian relief and disaster relief along with the Air Force and along with the Army. So humanitarian relief is a very, very important subject for any maritime power in cooperation with the other services. This is a very much a part of a ship. It's called the chart table. With this chart table and with dividers, you get the distance, With a parallel ruler, you get the bearing or the course a ship is to follow. This is a typical chart, Bombay to Cape Comorin, and the chart of West India. And therefore, you can see that with these items in a chart table, you do navigation. There is a little radar on top, but today we are totally dependent on the radar and electronics and GPS. But the young children who come here get very excited and want to learn of how a ship actually navigates, where there are no roads, there are no markings where to go, there are no road signs, but the Navy has to navigate. And that is a very important feature for a navigator who becomes a captain, to navigate a ship in war and in peace. This is a very important corner of the museum. The Battle of Trafalgar in United Kingdom made sure that Britain rose to power. The sun never set on the British Empire. It is the 1971 war and the 1971 missile attack on Karachi that actually changed the fortune of India. Bangladesh was formed. So again, young children who come, and of course elders who come, look at this and try to compare the Battle of Trafalgar with the 1971 War of India. Towards the rest of the museum are all artifacts which you will see on ships. The steering wheel, the various copies of the movies we had to see when there was no television. And as we move forward, we come across the instruments and Shanna Varuna, the motto of the Indian Navy that guides it. We move upward to come to some other artifacts, the copy of the binoculars, of the small cameras that we had in those days, and binoculars, and of course depiction of the Kerala boats, because Kerala is a port of India which gave business to India with the West, is very important in the history of the merchant navy and the Indian Navy. From there, we move on to the final presentation. Again, we see the items on the Navy, the boat compass, the telescope, the boats which we use, the missiles that are being used in the Navy, and of course, a depiction of the Second World War ships, the big ones, and of course, many medals who have been presented by the Indian Navy and others as memory of their memory in this museum. So therefore, coming to the end of our museum tour is INS Kochi, the Type 15 Alpha ship, where one is able to explain to whoever comes to this museum the helicopter, the weapons, the MF star radar, and how a ship operates. I am thankful to the commanding officer of INS Kochi for presenting this beautiful model to add to the 27 models, because they give the flavor of the museum. And I am sure whoever comes to the museum goes back with a happy feeling that he is trying to understand the future of India lies somewhere in the seas of India. Jai Hind.